All right, guys, this is flip section two. So where we left off is we got flip inserted. We have the ground inserted, the background. He can walk on the platform, but there's a lot of issues with how he walks. So right now, he doesn't turn left and right, and he doesn't play any walking animation. So that's kind of what we're going to address in this video. So we'll go ahead and get started on that. So the first thing we're going to do is let's add in some more animations for flip. So to add animations, you need to double click on your character or your sprite, and it brings up the image editor here. Okay. Now, what we're going to do is this initial animation we have of him just standing there, that's going to be our default animation. So we're going to rename it so that it has that name. So we're going to right click on animation one in the upper right. We're going to rename it. We're going to call it default with a capital D, just like that. Okay. Then what we're going to do is we're going to add in some other animations. So we're going to go ahead and start with a walk animation. So we're going to right click in the empty box here. We're going to do add animation, and I'm going to rename it right away by right clicking on it. I'm going to call it walk with a capital W. Okay. There's his walk animation. Now you'll see that there's nothing here. Now to insert an animation is going to be a little different than when we inserted the picture before. So if you're inserting something and you know that it's just one frame, it's just a single frame, you can load it with the folder up here. But if you're going to have multiple animation frames, we have to load that a little bit differently. So our walk does have multiple frames. So in this, this is called the animation frame window. In Construct 3, instead of calling it animation frame window, it's the name of your animation and then the word frame. So this is just saying walk frames, but this bottom window is the animation frames window. Okay, so I'm going to right click in the empty white space. I'm going to import frames, and we're going to do from a strip. Okay. Later on in other games, we do from files or from strip. I guess I can tell you right now. So what a strip is, it's basically a single image that has all of the animations on one image file. Okay, that's what a strip is. From files would be as if each animation frame was a separate image file and you wanted to select multiple files. So that's the difference between the two. The way Flip is set up, it's on a sprite strip. So we're going to do from strip. Okay, and then you're going to locate your flip assets and you want to find flip walk. Okay, now if you have this little thumbnail view like I have where you click up here and you choose large icons, okay, you could actually like count in here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 8 little flips in there. So what you're going to do is you're going to double click it. And the reason why you need to know how many flips are in there is because the computer is stupid, right? So it doesn't look at that and see 8 different flips. It just sees it as a single image. So you need to tell the computer how to divide that out. So it's going to ask you for horizontal cells. So that means from left to right, how many copies of flip are there? So we counted 8 of them. So there's 8 copies of flip. Okay, that's going to cause it to divide it up evenly. Vertical cells means height-wise, how many rows are there? And there was only the one row, so we'd leave that at 1. Now I'm going to do this incorrectly. So let's say we did 4. That was the default, right? So if I click import, you'll see it like does 2 flips on each one because we didn't divide it out enough. So that's why it's important to put the correct number in there, and that's why the computer's stupid, because it doesn't really understand that. So I do get a lot of students that turn it in, and we got these 2 flips walking side by side. The other issue is some people go into this folder and load it up this way. Well, when you load it through the folder, you don't get the option to tell it the frame. So then I just get this one frame with 8 flips on it. So I'm going to go ahead and do it properly. So import frames from a strip. I'm going to do flip, walk, and then we're going to do 8. Okay. And then I like to do this checkbox here. It says replace entire animation. So if I click that, it's going to delete everything else out and just put in what I want. So I always have this replace entire animation checked. So I click import. The only time you wouldn't want that is if you're like adding frames to something you already have and you don't want to lose your other frames, then you don't want that checked. But most of the time for what we're doing in here, you want that checked. So you can see now it cut it up and we've got these nice 8 frames here of flip walking. Okay. Now, if you click on the animation name in the upper right, we get properties down here in the lower right. So we can change the animation speed. So the speed here isn't how fast Flip physically moves, it's how fast the animation plays. So we're going to leave that at 5. But later on, if you wanted to say make Flip run and physically make him move faster, you could also increase the animation speed with that so his arms actually go faster and his legs go faster. But for the walk, we'll leave it at 5 and we'll put loop to yes. That means the animation will continue to loop. So if we don't have that checked, Once Flip plays this last frame down here, he's just going to stay like that, and it's going to look really weird. But by having it loop, this frame's going to loop back to frame 0, and it's going to look like one nice continuous animation. Okay, so we've got the walk animation in, and we've got it to loop. Um, Now, if I were to run my game right now, he's not going to start walking because we have to program and tell the computer when to play that animation. So, talking to a computer is like you have to do every single little step, one thing at a time, um, and you have to really lay it out. All right, so we got the walk animation done. So, let's add a jump animation. So, right click the animation windows, add an animation. I'm going to rename it, and I'm going to call it jump with a capital J. Okay. The jump animation I think is multiple frames, so I'm going to right click in the frames window, the animation frames window, import frames from a strip. And I think jump is 3 frames. Yep, right here. So you can see that there's 3 of them. So I'm going to put in 3 horizontal, 1 vertical, replace whole animation and import, and we're good to go. I believe if you're following the presentation, the slideshow version, they always tell you to delete the frame 0. So they don't have you check that box and then they have you load it in like that and then have you delete it. And to me, that's just like an extra step that we don't need to do. So let's just replace the animation and then we're good to go. So if you're confused on, like if it says you're doing the presentation and yours looks like this, obviously I don't want to delete frame 0 because that's one of his frames. It's if you have an empty frame because you didn't check replace animation, that's when you want to do it. All right, so we got jump in and then we're just going to add a fall animation, add animation, rename, we're going to call it fall. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is his fall frame is a single frame, so I'm just going to load that through the folder. So I'm going to click the folder in the upper left, and then here's flip fall, just 1 frame. Okay. If you're not sure if it's 1 frame or not, you can import all of them this way. You could always import from a strip, and then you just put 1 vertical, 1 horizontal, and it would do the exact same thing. So you'd be good to go there. Okay. Now, something that's really important to check is as you add in more animations, you want to make sure you get all of the collision boxes and all of the origin points consistent. Now, if you're following the presentations, they have you do this a little bit later, but issues will already start to arise potentially if you don't do it now. So I'm just going to show you how to do it right now. So to start off, I've got my flip here, right? And I'm going to go to default animation and just go to this here. The origin is this little button here, and I talked a little bit about it with the ground. For flip, you want it to be just in the center is fine. But if I was here and I accidentally clicked out like that, if I played an animation, like 1 frame would have a different origin than the other, and it makes your character look very glitchy and they like jitter around and stuff. So it's really important that the origin is in the middle. So if you haven't touched your origin, it should be fine. But if you want to be safe, you could just quick assign it to middle. And then what you can do is you can right click origin again and you can do apply to all animations. So if I've done that, I've literally just taken every frame of all these animations and given it a centered origin point. So that's something I recommend doing. Same thing with collision box. So that's going to be the button right below it. Okay. Now what the collision box is when Flip collides with something, it's not actually going by the sprite itself. It's going by this box. And so when we inserted this, it's trying to guess, what his collision box is. And that's not like a terrible collision box, but for an object that platforms, we don't want to have like these angled curves at the bottom because that's going to allow him to like glitch on surfaces. He's not going to be very flat and solid on the bottom. He's going to be able to like clip on walls, like just by having like these angles that are just slightly angled. Like he's going to be able to like wall jump basically, and we don't want that. We just want it to be nice and solid. So what I recommend you do on your default is if you right click in the middle of this, you want to do set to bounding box. Now later on, we are going to change this to a smaller box, but for now, this is just fine. And then we want to do that for all of the other animations. Well, rather than doing them all one at a time, we just right click in the middle of the box and we're going to say apply to all animations. So if I randomly just went to walk here and I picked any random frame, you can see it's got that same collision box and it's got the same origin. So it's going to be nice and consistent. Okay, so let's just do a quick check on everything here. I'm going to run it. Now, like I said, it's going to look exactly the same as when we started. The animations now, we have info for them. They're stored. They have data, but we still have to tell the computer when to play them. Okay. The other thing is on these other animations, um, The jump and fall animation, they don't need to loop, so you can leave that unchecked. I think in the presentation they tell you to loop the jump animation, but that doesn't really make sense to me. Um, I think when he jumps, you just want to leave his knees up at the end. Otherwise, if it loops, he's going to look like he's like kicking through the air. So I guess if you want it to loop and have him kick through the air, you can do that. But I think that one's good to be like not looping. And fall should not be looping either, because then he'll just stay with his knees out like he's falling, which I think is good. Okay, so let's go ahead and start adding events in to get these animations to work. So on the right side in the project window, I'm going to double click on my ES game event sheet. We've got a blank event sheet to start putting some code in. So basically what we want to do is we want to say when Flip is moving, he should play the walk animation. So I'm just going to double click to add an event. Oh, I forgot to do this. Let me jump back. See how my flip is named Sprite? So I kind of just kept going, but I intentionally didn't name that because I was going to show you something. So let me just backtrack a bit. So when you create a sprite, if you double click on Sprite and forget to name it, all you have to do is just highlight your object. Just click it once. If you double click, you're going to get into the image editor. So if you want to do properties, just single click it. And I'm going to go to my properties here on the left with flip selected, and I can just rename them right up here. So we'll name him Flip so he's properly named. And it's extremely important that everything is labeled and named. Part of how I grade is I grade you on organization, and that's going to be with how your events are laid out, and also that your objects are all labeled properly. The more you label things, the more you organize, the cleaner everything's going to look. It's going to be easier to find bugs. It's going to be easier to understand what's going on. The problem with not naming anything is basically your whole list of objects are going to be sprite 1, sprite 2, sprite 3, sprite 4, sprite 5. And when you're coding, that gets super confusing. So, oh, sprite 4 collides with sprite 5. Well, I don't know what that is. So I want to know if it's flip colliding with the knight or flip colliding with an arrow. Like that's why you need to name everything. It's super, super important. So make sure you guys are naming things as you go. It's going to make things way less confusing for you. All right, so I'm going to add an event for flip. And the trigger we're looking for is on moved. So like you could scroll and look for it, or you could just search for it. So if you know what the command is called, you could type it in. So I could type on moved and you'll see it comes up with on moved. Now something else you could do is maybe you're not sure what the command is, but you know it has to do with platforming because the platforming is what makes him move. If I just type in platform, it gives me everything related to platform behaviors here. So here's my on moved. So it's going to say flip on moved. So this is the condition. So when this condition is met, it will do the action. So the action is I want it to play the walking animation. So I'm going to click add action. I'm going to do flip. Then we're going to do set animation. Okay. And then we need to type in the walk animation. Now here's the thing. When you're typing in here, if it doesn't look exactly the same as what you have, it won't work. So I labeled mine walk with a capital W. So if I type this in, to the computer, a lowercase w and an uppercase W are two completely different characters. So that will not line up. So it's got to be exact. Now, the nice thing with animations is if you have it programmed in already in the image editor, this is what I like to do. I like to just delete this all out of here and just type a quotation mark. When you type just a single quotation mark, it will actually list the animations you've created. You can double click on walk and it's going to spell it perfectly. So then there's no risk of error. So I highly recommend anytime you're typing in something like a command manually, if it gives you a little drop down and gives you choices, you always want to click the choices because then you're going to know it's typed out properly. There are some instances where you don't get that option. So then you just have to be very, very careful. All right, so flip on move set animation to walk. Let's run our game and try it out. So you can see as I move now, he goes into walk. Now we still have the issue that he doesn't turn left and right. And then the other issue is if I stop moving, we didn't tell the animation to stop playing. So the animation is just going to keep playing forever and ever and ever. So once again, this is how the computer is stupid. We didn't tell it to stop playing, so it's just going to keep playing. Okay. So in order to stop it from playing, we're just going to do a command that says when flip stops, set the animation back to default. So let's add an event for flip. We're going to do on stopped is the command. And then we're going to set his animation to default. Now, to save time, if you have a similar event already down, you could just copy it and edit it. So I'm going to show you that really quick. So if I wanted to grab this flip set animation and copy it down here, if I just hold control on my keyboard and I click and drag it, then it copies it. Or another thing you could do, if you don't like doing the click and drag method, you could right click it and copy it. And then, whoops, I did the wrong thing. I think I did cut. right click and copy, and then I could right click on this event and paste, and I will allow it, and then it will just paste right in that way. Okay. So, or if you're not comfortable with copy and paste yet and you just would rather type it all out, that's fine. You can do it that way too. But if I copy this in, now I can just double click this and I can just change the name from walk to default. So I can delete this out, type a quotation mark, double click default, and I'm good. Okay. So now if I run it, the changes should be in there. So if I'm moving, he should be in walk animation. And then when I stop, he should go to default. I need to stand still. So we're getting there. Kind of fixing things up and getting it to look a little bit better. Okay. Um, so what we're going to fix next is we're going to make him actually like turn around if we walk left. So that's something that's called mirroring. So what it is Flip has this little animation here, right? And he's facing to the right. So if I tell him to mirror, it's literally going to just do like a horizontal flip like that in the code. That's going to flip him around the other way. Okay. Don't actually do what I'm doing in the image editor. I'm just kind of explaining that. So flip by default is facing right. So that's considered not mirrored. If he's facing left, that is considered mirrored. Now, what we want to do in order to tell the computer when he's facing left or right, basically, we have to think of a command based on what we're doing. Well, when flip is facing left for us, it's because we're pressing the left arrow on the keyboard. So we want to set up a command that basically says when we're holding down the left arrow key that we want him to be mirrored. So in order to do keyboard commands, we actually have to add a keyboard object into the game. So it's the same way we would add a sprite. So if we were on our layout, I could double click and I could add the keyboard in here. But since I'm on my event sheet, I don't want to have to go to the layout if I don't need to. So that's when I will use this object type window right here. So I can just right click it, add a new object type, and it's the keyboard is what we're actually inserting. So we can type in keyboard. Now, when you insert the keyboard, so I'll double click and insert it. So the keyboard will show up here on the right, but the keyboard isn't something we physically see on the layout. It's not like an actual sprite, right? A keyboard basically is just saying that we're allowing keyboard control. So it's a control type, right? It's an input type. So if we wanted to use the mouse to like click on things, we'd have to insert the mouse in. If we wanted to use a controller, we would have to insert a controller. Same thing. Now that we've inserted the keyboard, we are allowed to do keyboard coding on our event sheet. So I'm going to add an event for the keyboard. And then what I want to do is I want to say on key is down. So there's a big difference here. So we have key pressed and key down. So key pressed just means it'll trigger once when you press it. Key is down means the event will trigger as long as you are holding that key down. So basically we want him to mirror left anytime we are holding the left arrow because that means we're walking to the left. So we're going to say key is down, and then we're going to click and choose which key we want, and we're going to do left arrow. So I literally, to do that, I just pressed the left arrow on my keyboard, and then I clicked OK, and then done. So now this says anytime the left arrow is down, we tell Flip what we want him to do. So we're going to add an action for Flip, and this has to do with mirroring. So if I just type in the word mirror or start to type it, we can do something called set mirrored. Okay, and then we can set him to be mirrored or not mirrored. So left we said would be mirrored because right now he's facing right by default. So left we have to mirror him so he swaps. Okay, now here's the issue. Okay, so that's all good. When I go left, he turns left. That's great. He mirrored. But now the issue is as I walk right again, and he doesn't turn back. So this is how literally you have to be at the computer. I have to tell him to move to the, I have to do the same event essentially, but I have to not mirror for right arrow. So that's a pretty similar event to this whole thing, right? So remember before how I copied this walk animation? So I could copy this mirror down to a new event if I want to. I could copy that down to a new event if I wanted to. But if I want to copy the whole event, what you do is you click on the far left here. And this is really important. So you can see here where like these green arrows are, or in this one, it's an empty spot. This is the spot you pick to like grab the whole event. So if I wanted to move and drag, change the event order or whatever, you have to grab it by the far left. If I tried grabbing this and let's say I wanted that event up there, right? But let's say I grabbed it here, what happens is it's just taking the condition. So then it kind of messed everything up. It merged these together as a condition and it left this blank. So I don't want to do that. So you just have to be careful about like where you're grabbing when you're moving or copying things. So what I could do is I could highlight this whole thing. I could hold control and try to drag an event right above it, and I've just copied that whole event. Or I could do a right click copy, and I could just do a right click paste on the same event, and that works too. Okay. Or you could just add a new event and do it freehand, right? So now basically I want to do right arrow and not mirrored. So I'm going to double click here, click this, change it to right arrow. And then I'm going to change the set mirror to not mirrored like that. Okay. So now if I run it, it should work. So my code says left arrow down, mirrored, right arrow down, not mirrored. So now he looks like he walks back and forth pretty cleanly. Don't have the jump animations in yet, so that's what we're going to get to next. Okay. So basically for jumping, we're just going to add another event for flip, and this is called on jump. So this says flip on jump. We're going to add an action for flip. We're going to set his animation, and I'm going to delete and type a quotation mark, and we're going to set it to jump. So now the jump animation will play when he jumps. Okay. And then what we're going to do is, well, I'll show you. So here's the issue though now. So now I'll jump, but now you see he just keeps his knees up in the air when he lands. So if I jump and then I'm moving like this, it's like he's scraping his knees. So what's happening is because, flip technically is moving this whole time, which should trigger the walk animation. But since the jump and fall animation happen after, that's overriding it, and there's not a new instance of him moving. So now if I stop and then start to move, then it would go into the moving animation. So what we need to do is we need to do a seamless transition into him either going into default or walk animation directly from a fall. So we're going to create a sub event. So basically a sub event is anytime there are multiple conditions in one situation that could happen differently where you want different things to happen. So essentially what's going to happen is, well, okay, hold on. I'm getting ahead of myself. We have to put the fall animation in first. So let's do that. So we're going to add an event for flip and we want to do on fall. Okay, because we have to have the fall animation before we continue. So basically when he falls, we are going to set his animation to fall. So I'm going to do flip, set animation, and then we're going to do fall. Okay. All right. So then he's going to be playing the fall animation as he falls. Okay. Then what we're going to do is we're going to add an event that looks for when flip lands. So the trick is when he lands, that's when we need him to either go into a walk or a default animation, right? So we're going to do flip, and we're going to do something called on landed. Okay. Now, when flip lands, there are two scenarios. He's either moving or not moving. So if flip lands and he's not moving, I want him to go to default, so he just stands still. If he lands and he is moving, I want him to go to walk animation. So we are going to add two sub events onto this land because there are two different situations that could happen when he lands. So I'm going to right click where the green arrow is. I'm going to do add sub event, and I'm going to do flip, and I want to test if he is moving. So if I type in is moving, we'll have that. So if flip is moving, I'm going to add an action next to the is moving, and I want flip's animation to go to walk. So I'm going to do flip animation to walk. Now I just typed that out manually, but I literally could have just copied this right here and just thrown it right down there. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another sub event to this for the other situation that flip is not moving. So I'm going to add a sub event. Now here it's really important, okay, that you pay attention to how the sub eventing works. I don't want to sub event into this. If I sub evented into this, then that means every event above it would have to trigger. So you'd have to land and you'd have to be moving and you'd have to be not moving, which physically isn't possible. So the not moving event should be even with this, and they both should be sub evented to on landed. Okay, so I'm going to right click on the on landed, the green arrow, add a sub event, and I want to do flip is not moving. So if I type in is moving again, there is no option for not moving. So if there's not that option, we're going to pick is moving again. But if you right click on the event here, I can invert it and it will put a red X on it. So that means it's the opposite. So this basically means flip is not moving. Then I want to set him to default. So I've got a default animation code right here. So I'm just going to hold control and drag that guy right down and we're good to go. So now the way this event reads, if flip lands and he's moving, he's going to walk. Otherwise, if he is not moving, he's going to go to default. Okay, so now if I run it, so there's the jump and then the fall, and then you can see he just went into stand animation. Now if I jump while moving, you'll see he goes right into walk, and now it's nice and seamless. Okay. So that is basically it for section two.